Welcome everybody. It's May Clark from Earthlight Energies, and this video series is part of the Wellness Project 2020. And today I have the great pleasure to have Jana Brogan here. And Jana Brogan, among other things, is a death doula. And today we're going to be talking about courting death, the intimate dance between cradle and grave. How are you doing today, Jana?
Good morning, May. I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
I am fabulous. And I was going to mention the date just so people know. It's July 9th. And we're recording from the beautiful city of North Bay, Ontario. And Jana is lucky enough to be outside enjoying our fabulous summer weather that we're having. And I thought perhaps what we would do is, a lot of people have probably never heard of what a death doula is, but before we go into that, I wondered if you could just give us a bit of background about yourself and how you were led to become a death doula.
Certainly, Emily. Thank you. So I guess in my 20s, I had the privilege and also the terrifying reality of being present with my grandfather when he passed, without any kind of understanding of what that was going to look like. He was sick in the hospital, and I really held vigil with him, and I just didn't know what it was called, but I had no one to guide me through it, and I didn't know what to expect. And I knew that somebody needed to be with him.
Oh, we just have you glitching out a little bit here. There we go.
Okay, and I didn't understand why or what I was supposed to be doing, and it was a really intuitive thing, but I was very emotional and I was terrified. And then my grandfather passed, and that was that. And it felt very abrupt, and like there was a part missing in the whole sequence. And then in my early 30s, again, I was with my grandmother in hospital while she died, and it was very much the same thing. And even having been through one vigil, it wasn't any easier, and it was still I sort of castigated and berated myself after the fact that I hadn't done it right, and I had said things or responded in a way that probably wasn't ideal for my grandmother. And then almost 4 years ago, I found out that my ex-partner was diagnosed with cancer, and we have a daughter together who was 10 at the time. And I had to walk that entire year from his diagnosis to his death with my daughter, and try and hold space for her and support her, but I really didn't know how to do it, and try and support him in a way that was beneficial to him. But there was sometimes a conflict between what was best for him and what was best for my daughter, and I really didn't know how to maneuver through this with grace. And then when we found out that he was palliative, and I had to tell my daughter that her father was going to die, I don't think I did a great service. I don't think I did it well. I was so caught up in my own fears and regrets and emotion. It was just very dysfunctional. The whole process felt dysfunctional. And right up until his death, I just felt like there's something missing here, and we're not doing something right. I don't have the language, or I don't have the skill set to do this. And I really had an opportunity after his death to sit with that and think about it. And I started to do some research to figure out, how can we make this really important time more meaningful, more supportive, and easier for everyone involved. And I discovered that there were actually it was actually something called to help you navigate through this time, and just sort of as a guide or a facilitator for the dying person in the family or the community.
Yeah, you got cut off there. So did you say that? So you did discover that you that there was a death doula? Is that yes? Okay.
Yes, and that the role was to, the death doula role was really to help facilitate for the family and the dying person and the community at large, sort of a guide, as it were. to help people navigate through this really emotional and terrifying time. And so I decided that this was something that I had never considered doing, but I really felt that I needed to do this for myself, for my family, for my community. And so I studied at the Institute of Traditional Medicine. It was a very intensive six-month course that I traveled to Toronto regularly for. And we just had a series of really fantastic teachers, spiritual teachers. We studied with Indigenous elders, we studied with Buddhist monks, and we met with funeral directors and lawyers and
would you, sorry to interrupt, but would you say that having met with these people from different cultures and different belief systems, did that change anything for you as far as how you view death? You might talk about this later, I don't know, but that exposure to that, did that change how you viewed death, or did you find it was in alignment with how you were viewing death at that time?
I feel like I have a Buddhist background, and I have a very open relationship with death and dialogue of death within myself. Right. I'm never sure how to broach it with the larger societal context, but I do believe that it was a very clear indicator that perhaps in Western society, we do death a disservice.
Right.
That was what I took from my experiences, that we don't sit with death the way that other cultures do.
Right.
We bury our dead in graveyards, and then Hollywood puts all the monsters in the graveyards in this sacred place, so we think of cemeteries as places where the monsters live. Like there's this juxtaposition, and we tend to, in Western society, not talk about death, although it is the one sure thing that's going to happen.
Right.
And we make it seem like death. People say, well, if I die.
Yeah.
There's no if.
There is no if, you are.
You're going to. And they're shocked when I say that. People think that if we use the right skin creams and do enough yoga and invest in ourselves on a cellular physical level, that we can outdistance death. But we should be investing in ourselves in an energetic level, and understanding that like cells are programmed to die, we are programmed to die also, like the trees have their cycle. So it was really gratifying and really validating
to be in that environment.
And to understand I'm not crazy when I sense the dysfunction. It is real, and there's a better way.
Yeah. And I mean, coming from two different worlds, one of being a financial advisor, trying to get people to plan for death, and people are just so funny about, even creating a will. Well, if I do a will, then I'm going to jinx myself, I'm going to die. No, if you don't do a will and you die without a will, you are going to leave your grieving family in a huge mess. And, working as a financial advisor and working with these people on estate planning side, but then the other side of it, working on the Reiki side, is that people need to understand that, everyone will have their own belief systems, but we are beings of light. It does not end here. We have so much more beyond this physical body in this 3D world, so if we view death differently, if we prepared for death differently, then it's the ones that get left behind that are dealing with this, the whole death ritual that we have established here on the Western side. And it's like you just said, we're unprepared for it. We don't know what to do with it. Oftentimes it comes upon us so quickly, either because people die from, an accident, sudden death, or they have a prolonged illness, and you're caught up so much in the illness part of it. And, for the illness part too, it's just not the person who is dealing with that illness, but it's everyone around, it's the whole community around that. So.
And how about the fact that we live in a community, in a society, that when, you know, someone in your immediate family dies, you're given 3 days leave from work.
Wow.
3 days to, you know, to grieve your loved one, to bury your loved one, to process. Like, that is, to me, that is criminal.
Well,
That
if
is
you work for the government, then you get 5 days, but it's still not enough time. Yes.
right. It's not in like it's not enough time, and that speaks to how we need to change. Again, at a societal level, and bring in greater compassion and understanding of what it means to be healthy in life and in death. And there's such a correlation between the two. I always think of the infinity symbol as we live and die and breathe in and out, you know, because the legacy that we're leaving to those whom we're leaving, if we don't allow them or support them in their grieving process, furthers the dysfunction and the disease, you know, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and the fear. Like, you know, death isn't a drive-through that you can just pull up and order and leave. Like, we need to just create a little more, hold more space around this topic and around this act. And death isn't something that happens to us. We are participants. Death is something that we do. Like, we are participants, and the more that we participate in the concept, the dialogue, the planning of our own death, and I'm not talking necessarily about medical assistance in death, but actually planning in our minds and hearts what we want death to look like, you know, the easier it becomes. And
for everybody.
And there's a correlation between that and less pain meds and anxiety meds at the end of life. Right? As we live, we die.
Exactly. So you went to school in Toronto and you graduated. So what does your certificate actually say?
I'm a certified death doula in Canada. And because it's a relatively new field that is, you know, it's an evolving field. So what does that mean? I mean, it means I'm a certified death doula, and I've had training in end-of-life care. I'm not a medical professional in that capacity. I am midway through a course to become a clinical therapeutic herbalist, but as a death doula, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a legal professional, you know, but I can be part of the team, the death team, the caregiving team, and there's an integral role that the doula can play. But again, there are regulations about what we can't do, of course, because we're not legal or medical. But we can, the idea being that we are trained to recognize when you need to be speaking to a medical professional, when you're missing this piece of information and you need to be speaking to an estate planner right now, and I can help you contact one, or, you know, you need to be speaking to your, you know,
a lawyer. Is that what you said? You got glitched out.
Yeah, you need to be speaking to a lawyer, so we can help them. We can again help facilitate those connections, but I am not certified to do any of those on my own.
So what does the word doula actually mean?
Well, so doula is a term that has been used for people who help in the birthing process. Right, and to help bring in life and to help support the birthing mother and at large the family and the community, but primarily her focus, or his focus, I should say, the focus of the doula, there are many male doulas, is to support the woman in that birthing process, and often work with a midwife, you know, or can work with doctors, can participate in home birth or hospital birth. In Canada, we're not legally allowed to use the term death midwife. In the US, and other parts of the world, they are legally allowed to call themselves death midwives. We are not in Canada. So we have to be quite clear about that, probably because in Canada, the midwife is a medical person.
Is a medical person, yes.
Yeah, and we are not.
So with that certification, does that allow you then access into the hospital when patients are in the hospital or in hospice care? Any other other care homes where they might be assisting people? I'm just thinking of, I mean, of course you'd be allowed in homes and stuff, but I'm just thinking that certification then allows you to be present at the hospital. You
Yeah,
have
I'm
like
part of
hospital privileges.
I am part of the team.
Right.
You know, so
Okay.
I'm there on the I am there representing my client. Yeah, so the death doula is the opposite of a birth doula. So we walk the client through death and provide support and guidance and as de facto family and community as well, but my primary responsibility would be my client,
Good.
the
Okay.
person who's dying or not dying, because hopefully we work with people before they're given a diagnosis also.
Right. So maybe you could talk about a bit about your role as a death doula. So what are the activities or the process that you would normally go through if somebody hired you to work with the family or with them?
Well, so we've broken it down into a few different phases because it's such an encompassing role. So there's pre-diagnosis, which we don't normally see people pre-diagnosis, but we're hoping that we will see more. And it's talking to people who are healthy and vibrant and well, because death can happen at any time, at any age. But to start talking about death and start talking about legacy work and start talking about, what does death mean to you, and how do you want death to look, and how do you want to approach it, and what is your belief system, and helping people articulate that, because until you sit down and talk about death, there's a lot you don't know about yourself, surprisingly. And so just inviting that conversation. And then most people come to a death doula when they've received a diagnosis, when they've gotten had that conversation with a doctor. And then there are many reasons why they come to us, to plan their end of life, to talk about their vigil. Many people don't know the options available to them, so we can educate people at that point what their options are. My role is not to tell a client ever what his or her belief system is. It's to help my client articulate their own belief system and then support that however I can legally, whatever I'm allowed to do legally, but also emotionally, and to help them find the right support system and build the right team. Then there is vigil, and vigil is what happens when someone enters the active phase of death, and it can be a very short active phase. It can go 4, 5, 6 days, depending on the prognosis, and the individual really is what determines it. And that is, we sit with a dying person, and where we hold space for that person and the family. And ideally, the person plans their own vigil, so it is the way they would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people, that means having only a couple of people at the bedside. For some people, they would like their community to come through and sit with them. People can be very specific about what the vigil means to them. The music they want playing. Do they want scents? Do they want guided meditation? We can do guided meditation with a person when they're dying. We practice before the active phase of death, and it really helps them pass without the same kind of anxiety. So it's really up to the client. So we do vigil with them, and we always have somebody with the family and the client when the active phase is happening. And then there's post vigil, so we can help if that's what we've been sort of hired to do, to help plan the funeral, to be present, to help, or a celebration of life, and help support the family and the community during that time. And then there's usually a ceremony that we like to have with the families after, give a couple of months for people to sort of grieve and process. And then we like to come together and have a ceremony or a ritual, sort of an acknowledgement, and to just sort of process the relationship that we've built, because that relationship is a specific relationship, but now it's going to end and become a different kind of relationship. So it's closure for that intimate act that we have shared. Yeah.
And I just have to put a Reiki plug in here as well, because oftentimes, people, and I guess some people aren't really aware of this, but Reiki is very powerful and beneficial to people who are transitioning over. It can help create a very peaceful, supportive environment, not only for the person who is doing the transition, but also for the family as well. So,
well, as you say that, the team I'm trying to put together, because it's nearly impossible to practice as a doula in all aspects as a sole practitioner. So the team I'm trying to put together, one of the young women does Reiki. That's next on my list. When I'm done my herbal certification, I'll be doing Reiki also, because it is such an important and helpful tool to have. Definitely.
So when you talk about your team in the community, so what does that look like as far as who would be, is there a different team from at the beginning, the middle, and the end, or is it the same team all the way through? Maybe you could just talk about who that team would be that would help you.
Certainly. So I'm probably going to be practicing with at least 2 other women, and we will probably all have our areas of specialty. You know, I'm a trained visual artist. I spend most of my life as a visual artist, a potter and a sculptor and a silversmith. And I'm quite fascinated with legacy work and creating projects with people to express who they are and what they have been in this lifetime. You know, I have one of the ladies that I will partner with is really quite passionate about medical assistance in death. You know, the other woman that I'm going to be practicing with is an herbalist, and she's Reiki. So I'm sure we will all bring different skills and different passions to the team. It'll be a diverse group, and hopefully it will grow our team. So I think it depends on the client, and I think it depends on the needs that they articulate, and then we will try and pair them with the best person as a primary. Right. And it also about, we did a lot of, you have to do a lot of work, you know, self excavating to know where your triggers are, to know where your personal limits are. And every person is not a good fit with every client, right? I can only go as far with my client as I've gone myself, and I will have my own bias. Unfortunately, we all do, and personalities play a big part in it. So that will be, certainly, those will all be deciding factors.
Yeah, and I guess too, you could also, you know, even in the whole process with the family, even, you know, looking at it from the estate side of things, like the very logical, practical side of things, you know, having worked, you know, on that side of it, and just the dynamics in the family, you know, just go so crazy when somebody passes away.
Which is one of the benefits of having this dialogue when everyone's calm and before someone is in the active phase of death. Right. I explain to people, or as an example, I say, okay, so do I want my 3 daughters and my 4 daughters and my partner to have to decide while I'm dying how this is going to look, what's going to happen, what my obituary, do I want them writing my obituary and choosing a picture when they haven't slept for 3 days and are guzzling coffee? And each one of them loves me so much, but is going to think that they know what's best for me, right? So I am clear with them. Like now I'm clear with them, and it takes all the pressure off of them. They don't have to fight with themselves or each other or make these decisions. They're going to execute my wishes.
Right.
And so it's a much calmer and peaceful approach, and it actually allows the family time to just sit and hold space and grieve, because you remove all those extraneous responsibilities from their shoulders. And it's never going to be easy, but there are things that you can do to make it a lot
so much easier. Yeah.
So traumatic.
On the estate planning side, we always say that the will is your last love letter to your family. Yeah. But after meeting you, talking about being a, you know, what you do as a death doula, I thought, oh no, this is a very important part of that last love letter to the family, because that document is a very technical legal document. You know, I mean, you can add, you know, extraneous, you can have extra stuff attached to that. But how more, that would be so much more powerful if you have all that planning part of that done, saying, here are the pictures I want. I have a friend who passed away. She wrote her own obituary,
Yeah.
and I sat there laughing while I read it, because she wrote it in a very, it was her whole personality, and it was done in a very comical, witty way. And to me, when I read it, I just went, oh my God, thank you. Because if her family had done it, you know, I know someone who was just writing one recently, and it was like, oh my God, I forgot this person, I forgot that person.
Oh.
And you want to include, little aspects of the person's life, so that there's a story behind what this person has left behind. So I
And there's
see a lot of value in what you're doing.
there's
Add
also a
to that
correlation.
celebration.
Well, yeah, and there's a correlation again between people who are actively working on this and the way they die. They require less pain medication. They require less, fewer meds for anxiety and stress, because they are educated and they are prepared, and there are now far fewer unknowns than there were before. And
Right.
I won't be lying there actively dying and going, all those monkey thoughts in my brain, worrying about my children. Are they going to find this? Are they going to know where this is? Or are they going to dress me, and are they going to bury me instead of cremate me? Like,
Yes.
hello?
Yeah.
You know, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, what a lot of people don't realize either is that in a will, the executor has control over um, the actual funeral.
Yeah.
So if the executor says, you know what, you wanted to be buried, we're going to cremate you, or you don't want a celebration of, you don't want to have a funeral while we're going to have a celebration of life. So there's decisions that the executor can make after the fact that people don't realize, that their wishes might not be fulfilled. So if you have I mean, I don't know how many people would do that, but there have been circumstances, I'll give you a really good example. Like, try to talk to my family about my parents, because they're getting older. Hopefully they won't see this, and saying to them, like, what are your wishes? Like, what do you want to do? And my mom says, I want to be cremated and there'll be nothing. And I said, Mom, do you realize like how hard that would be on the family? Because if there's not even a celebration of life, there's no closure
There's no
for the family,
yes. Yeah.
And I said, I can tell you right now, if you that was your wishes, we would still have a celebration of life for you. And I said, you may, and she said, well, I'll just come back and haunt you. And I said, well, yeah, but I said, you have to understand, for us, it's about a celebration of who you are, what you've done in your life, and being able to share in that and move forward, right? It's
And
very
it's
important, I
ritual.
think.
It's ritual and it's healing, to
Yeah.
come together as a community and to share stories and to share grief and to share food is a very healing experience. And it's sort of like the articulation of a person's life story. I'm putting the periods in the right spot. We're wrapping this story up for this person and making sure that it is in its entirety whole.
Yeah.
It is important.
It's so important. And I think what I just, especially people that have lived much longer lives, like, my parents have friends now, they're in their 80s and 90s and they're passing away. And I think it's just so honorable to the person to be able to read about or be part of that celebration, where you get to find out all these really interesting and cool things about what they did in their lives, that, as a kid that knew this person that was a friend of my parents, you have no idea, of the really interesting things they've lived through, they've done, they've explored. Yeah.
One of my favorite legacy projects is actually to do a timeline of a person's life with them,
Yeah.
because they don't even realize until they start. And it's like this, and you can do it in scroll form that can be passed on to the family. And
Wow.
but people can look at it and read it at the celebration of life, or some families have taken this scroll and they pass it around to the various family members' house throughout the year.
Oh, what a great idea.
Articulation of the
Mhm.
things that people don't think about when they're summing up a life. But when you see this timeline in its entirety, each person is just such a marvel and has led such an adventure, right?
Mhm.
And it's not just stodgy old grandpa that you've only known to be grumpy and sit on the couch. You
What
know,
is it about grumpy grandpas?
right? These vibrant young men, and they had exciting lives, and they did these. They played guitars, they rode motorcycles, you know. And
Mhm.
I think it's so important that we remember people in their entirety, not just in this last phase and last stage of life, but in to know them, right? And we don't. When do my children have the opportunity to know me as anything but their mother? And
Right.
that mother role, like, I'm pretty open. They know I've had a really exciting and interesting life, but you know, it's you know someone, you remember them differently when you know them as a human being as
Mhm.
opposed to just a role, like
Right.
or grandpa or whatever. And I think it's a beautiful legacy to leave, and it's really it honors them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that we're going to have another session to talk about this, but we've run out of time today. So I think there's one last question quickly that I did want to ask you, just for information for people who'd be watching this. But you talk about the professionals. So you talk about the medical professionals, the lawyers, the accountants, the estate planners, the bankers, well, maybe not the bankers, but the main ones would be the lawyers, the medical professionals, the estate planners.
Yeah,
So is that, how are you educating those people, or letting them know that you're available and this is a service that families can connect with you on?
well, I'm just beginning my career as a death doula. So right now, I am just speaking as loudly and as often as I can about death. I do public speaking. If someone asks me to speak, if someone, and hopefully, uh, you know, as word gets out and people become more familiar with the term death doula,
Mhm.
um, there will be more interest and further dialogue. And we'll just educate the community, because maybe next time we can talk about what it means to be a compassionate community, and
Right.
what role death and death planning plays in a compassionate community. I'll just let you know before we go that I am planning on doing a death um, it's sorry, I've forgotten what I've called it, but anyway, so what it's going to be is um, probably, unfortunately, online. It was going to be in person, but it's different than a death cafe, and it's a bunch of people getting together to talk about death, but different professionals and different from different perspectives and paradigms. But I'm most excited. There's going to be a gentleman from Toronto whose name is Rami, and he's going to be speaking about palliative work and death doula work with the homeless in
Oh,
Toronto.
yes,
Yeah.
you have to let me know when you're going to do that, and I'll help promote it through my channels and stuff, because
Yeah.
that would be so fascinating.
Well,
And
it's so important because you can tell a lot about society by the way they treat their most marginalized
yeah,
people, right? And a
exactly.
compassionate community, no one should die alone unless that is their explicit wish
Wish. Yeah.
to do. But I can't even imagine what it must be like to be alone on the street and ill. That just shouldn't be happening. So yeah, so there's so much to talk about, Amy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to just share my screen here, if I can figure out how to do that again. And I'm just going to put your contact information, and then we'll end the recording, but just stay online because I just want to chat with you for a minute afterwards. So I'm just going to share your contact. That means I actually have to put my, there you go. I'll just leave this on the screen for a moment for everyone to see. If anyone wants to get a hold of Jana, it's Jana Brogan at EOLC with Grace at gmail.com, or you can text her at 249-358 and 0334. All right, and I am just going to end this recording. Thank you very much for everyone for participating, and thank you so much, Jana. I know we're going to be chatting more on this topic.